She had carried her 1-4-month-old son on her back through freezing rain at 9 on a Tuesday night, her fingers so numb she could not feel the handlebars, and when she walked through the door to deliver the food, the man waiting for her was not a customer. He was the same boy who had knocked her lunch tray into the trash in front of 200 students in the 11th grade. He had built a $2-3 billion company from nothing, had fired more executives than most people will ever meet, and on that night, standing behind the glass wall of his own building, he saw the one thing that made him stop moving. Before we begin, if this story stays with you, hit that subscribe button and leave a comment telling us where you are watching from right now. Maya checked her phone at 8:47 p.m. The weather app read 28 degrees. She looked at Sam, asleep on the mattress on the floor, his fist curled around the collar of his own shirt, the way he always held onto something when he slept. She did the math. 3 more deliveries tonight. Without them, rent would be short by $140. The apartment was below street level. That was the first thing you understood about where Maya lived. You walked down 7 concrete steps from the sidewalk to a door that sat half underground, and the door opened into a single room that measured 340 square feet, including the bathroom, which was not really a separate room, but a corner with a curtain and a toilet and a shower head that produced hot water for exactly 11 minutes before it turned cold without warning. The way it turned cold every time, as if the building itself had decided how much warmth she was allowed. The rent was $680 a month. She had calculated once that this came to $2 per square foot, which was more per square foot than some of the offices in the financial district downtown, except those offices had windows that looked out onto things. Her window looked out onto the brick foundation wall of the building next door, 14 inches away. The light that came through it was not really light. It was the memory of light, the gray suggestion of a sky that existed somewhere above her, but had not visited this room directly since the building was constructed in 1974. The room held what it needed to hold. A mattress on the floor, a plastic bin of clothes, a smaller bin of Sam's things, diapers and onesies, and the one stuffed bear that he slept with, a bear missing its left eye that she had found at a thrift store for 50 cents and washed 3 times before giving it to him, a hot plate on the counter beside the sink, 2 pots, 1 pan, a can opener. The room smelled like damp concrete and the particular mustiness of a space that never fully dries, and underneath that, baby powder and the faint sharp sweetness of the Vaseline she kept in a jar beside the mattress. She picked up the jar now. She unscrewed the lid and dipped 2 fingers in and rubbed the Vaseline into the skin of her hands, working it into the cracks along her knuckles where the skin had split open from the cold and from 8 hours of hot water and dish soap at the restaurant where she washed plates from 5 inches the morning until 1 inch the afternoon. The cracks were deep enough to bleed. She covered them not because she cared about the pain, but because blood on a delivery bag meant a complaint, and a complaint meant a deduction, and a deduction meant the $140 got further away instead of closer. Her hands were 27 years old. They looked 40. She did not think about this. She thought about the next thing. The next thing was Sam. He was asleep on the mattress, curled on his side with his fist against his mouth and his legs drawn up the way babies sleep when the air around them is colder than the air they want. She knelt beside him. She dressed him in layers. The first layer was a long-sleeve onesie she had cut down from one of her own thermal shirts, the seams re-sewn by hand with thread she had taken from the sewing kit at the dollar store. Not stolen, taken, because the kit had been opened and the thread was hanging out, and she needed 4 feet of it, and she took 4 feet and left the rest. The second layer was a fleece pullover, size 18 months, bought at a consignment shop for $3.50. The third layer was a zip-up jacket that was too big for him, size 2T. The sleeves hung past his hands. She folded them back and held them in place with 2 rubber bands, not too tight, tight enough to stay. She picked up the rain poncho. It was clear plastic, the kind that folds into a square the size of a wallet and costs $3 at the dollar store and is designed to be used once at a football game and thrown away. She had used it 31 times. She knew the number because she had bought it on the first night of her delivery shifts, 31 shifts ago, and she had used it every time it rained and several times when it did not rain, but the wind was bad enough that an extra layer mattered. The plastic had gone cloudy from use. One of the snaps was missing. She pulled it over Sam's head and adjusted the hood so it covered his forehead, but did not block his eyes. Sam opened his eyes. He looked at her. He did not cry. He looked at her the way he always looked at her when she woke him for night deliveries, with the quiet patience of a child who has learned that being moved in the dark is a thing that happens regularly and does not require protest. He was 14 months old and 22 pounds, and he had already learned the rhythm of his mother's survival, the way some children learn the rhythm of bedtime stories. She lifted him and held him against her chest. His face pressed into the space between her neck and her shoulder. His breath was warm. She could feel it through the collar of her hoodie, a small circle of heat against her skin, regular and damp. She would feel it there for the next 4 hours. It was the only warm thing about the night that was coming. She placed him into the carrier. It was not a carrier you could buy. It was fabric she had cut from a bedsheet and sewn into a wrap using a YouTube tutorial she had watched 6 times on the library computer because she did not have internet at home. The wrap distributed his 22 pounds across her shoulders and lower back in a way that was manageable for the first 2 hours and painful after that. She had tested it. She knew where the pain started. She knew how long she could carry it before it became the kind of pain that changes the way you stand. She tightened the wrap. She felt Sam settle against her back. His breath moved to the spot between her shoulder blades. She picked up the delivery bag, the insulated one the app required, black, square, smelling like old cheese and tomato sauce, and the particular synthetic warmth of food that is already cooling. She zipped her hoodie. She pulled up the hood. She checked her phone. 3 orders available within a 5-mile radius. She opened the door and walked up the 7 steps into the cold. The night hit her face like a hand. 28 degrees. The rain was not falling straight down. It was moving sideways, carried by a wind that came off the river and cut through the streets at angles that found every gap in clothing, every exposed inch of skin, every opening between zipper and collar and sleeve and glove. She did not have gloves. She had tried wearing the rubber dishwashing gloves from the restaurant once, but they made her hands sweat, and then the sweat froze, and that was worse than bare skin. Her scooter sat chained to the iron railing at the top of the steps. It was not a scooter that belonged in a category. It was a 2009 Honda with 47,000 miles on it, and a crack in the left mirror and a seat held together with duct tape, and a battery that needed to be jumped on mornings below 25 degrees. She had bought it for $800 from a man on Craigslist 7 months ago, cash, and she had taught herself to ride it by watching videos and practicing in the parking lot behind the library at 6 inches the morning before anyone arrived. She unlocked the chain. She swung her leg over the seat. Sam shifted on her back, adjusting to the new angle the way he always adjusted, automatic, without waking fully. She started the engine. It caught on the second try. The vibration moved through the seat and up her spine and into Sam, and she felt his body absorb it the way he absorbed everything she carried him through, without complaint, without understanding, with the simple trust of a child whose entire world is the body of the person carrying him. She pulled into the street. The first delivery was 1.3 miles east, a nail salon on Granby, order placed at 8:52, 2 containers of pad thai and a bubble tea. She rode. The rain hit her face and ran down her neck and soaked into the collar of her hoodie and began the slow process of reaching the skin underneath, which would take about 12 minutes based on past experience, 12 minutes before the cold moved from outside her clothes to inside them, and after that, the distinction between wet and dry stopped mattering because everything was wet. Sam's breath held steady between her shoulder blades. That was the compass. That was the one reading she checked more often than the app. As long as the breath was there, warm and regular, and real against her back, the rest of it was manageable. The cold was manageable. The rain was manageable. The 4.2 miles to the next delivery, and the 3.1 miles after that, and the math that ran constantly in the back of her head were manageable. $18.50 from the first 2 deliveries, plus the $8.50 from the third, would make $27 for the night, and $27 times 6 nights this week would put her at $162. and $162 was $22 more than the $140 she needed, and the $22 would go to diapers because Sam was down to 9, and diapers cost $11.49 for a pack of 28 at the dollar store, which was not really a dollar store because nothing in it cost $1 anymore, but the name remained like a promise the economy had broken and never corrected. She made the first delivery. The woman at the nail salon opened the door, took the bag, said nothing, tipped $2. The $2 appeared on the app 4 minutes later. Maya was already riding to the second address. The second delivery was a third-floor walk-up on Colonial Avenue, no elevator. She climbed the stairs with Sam on her back, and the bag in her left hand and her right hand on the railing, which was loose. She knocked. She waited. 4 minutes. She knocked again. The door opened. A man in sweatpants took the bag without looking at her and closed the door. No tip. The app confirmed. $0. She stood in the hallway. Sam began to cry. Not loud. The soft whimper of a child who is cold and tired and has reached the edge of the patience he was born with, which was considerable for a 1-4-month-old but not infinite. She bounced gently on her heels, the motion moving through the carrier and into Sam, the rhythm she used every night, the rhythm that worked for 3 or 4 minutes before it stopped working, and she had to find another rhythm, because that was what motherhood was, finding the next rhythm when the current one ran out. She walked down the stairs. She stepped outside. The rain had not stopped. She rode. She thought about Sam the way she always thought about him when the night was long and the cold was real, in specifics. He had learned to say a word last week. Not mama, just ma. 1 syllable. He said it when he saw her face in the morning, and he said it when she picked him up, and he said it when he was falling asleep, and wanted her to know he was still awake. 1 syllable. It carried everything. He liked to hold her index finger when he slept. Not her hand. Her finger. The right index finger specifically. He would find it in the dark and wrap his fist around it, and hold it against his chest and sleep. She did not know why that finger. She did not need to know. She knew the weight of his hand around it, and the weight was enough. He was afraid of thunder. Not lightning, thunder. The sound of it. During storms, he would press his face into her neck and stay there, and she could feel his whole body tighten with each crack, and she would hold him and say nothing because he was too young for words to help and old enough for presence to be enough. These were the thoughts she carried through the streets at night. They were small. They were ordinary. They kept her riding. Her phone buzzed. The third order, Caldwell and Associates, 27th floor, 1100 Commerce Street. 4 boxes of pizza, 2 salads, 3 bottles of water. Delivery fee, $8.50. Estimated tip, $0. Distance, 4.2 miles. She accepted it. She accepted it because $8.50 was $8.50, and because the math required it, and because the math did not ask her opinion. It asked her to ride 4.2 miles through freezing rain with a baby on her back to deliver pizza to people who would probably not look at her face when they took the food. She turned west onto Commerce. The buildings got taller. The streetlights got brighter. The sidewalks got wider and emptier, the way sidewalks get empty in business districts after 9 at night, when the only people left are the ones who clean the buildings and the ones who own them. She did not know that the building she was riding toward held more than an order. It held a name she had spent 11 years trying to forget. 11 years earlier, Maya sat in the cafeteria at Westfield High School with a plastic tray in front of her, containing a scoop of mashed potatoes, a square of meatloaf, a carton of milk, and a bread roll that was hard on the outside and soft in the middle, in the way that institutional bread is always hard on the outside and soft in the middle, as if it cannot decide what it wants to be. She had gotten the tray the way she got it every day. She stood in line. She reached the register. She said her number, 741-2. She said it the way you say things you wish you could whisper, but are required to say at normal volume because the woman behind the register was 60 years old and hard of hearing and would ask you to repeat it if you did not say it clearly the first time. 7412, the free lunch code. Everyone in line knew what a 4-digit code meant. A 4-digit code meant your family had filled out a form. The form meant your household income was below the federal poverty line. The poverty line meant you were poor, and the code meant everyone watching you say it knew you were poor, and the tray you carried away from the register carried that knowledge with it like a label printed on the bottom that only faced up. Maya sat at a table near the wall. She sat there every day, the same seat. Not because she liked it, but because it was the seat closest to the exit, and the exit was the thing she wanted nearest to her at all times in that building. She was 16. Her mother worked 2 jobs: housekeeping at the Marriott on Waterside Drive from 6 inches the morning until 2 inches the afternoon, then serving at a bar on Hampton Boulevard from 8 at night until close, which was usually 2 inches the morning. Her mother slept 4 hours a night. Maya knew this because the apartment walls were thin, and she could hear her mother's alarm at 5:15 every morning and her mother's key in the lock at 2:30 every night, and the distance between those 2 sounds was her mother's life. Her father had left when she was 3. She did not remember him. She remembered a jacket, brown leather, cracked at the elbows, hanging on a hook by the front door, and then one day the hook was empty and no one explained why. And she learned that some questions are answered by the absence of the thing you were asking about. She grew up in Ridgemont, Block 4, the housing project on the east side of the city where the buildings were made of the same tan brick and the hallways smelled like bleach and cooking oil and the particular closeness of too many people sharing too little air. She did not think of it as poor. She thought of it as home. Poor was a word that other people used about her, and she did not pick it up. Bradley sat 4 tables away. He sat there every day too, but for different reasons. He sat in the center of the cafeteria, because the center was where you sat when you wanted to be seen, and Bradley wanted to be seen the way certain people want to be seen, not because they have something to show, but because being seen was the only skill they had practiced enough to be good at. He was the son of a man who owned 3 car dealerships in the suburbs, a colonial house with a pool, and a boat he kept at the marina and used twice a year. Bradley drove a BMW 3 Series to school. It was silver. It was new. He parked it in the front row of the student lot where the teachers could see it, and the teachers saw it and said nothing because the dealerships sponsored the school's athletic program, and the name Whitford was on the scoreboard in the gymnasium. Bradley did not hit people. He was not that kind. He was the other kind. The kind that used words the way a surgeon uses a scalpel: precise, clean, no blood, no bruise, nothing a teacher could point to and call violence. He found the thing about you that you most wanted to hide, and he said it in front of people, and he said it with a smile, and the smile was the worst part because it meant he was enjoying it, and the enjoyment meant it would happen again. He walked past Maya's table. He was carrying his own tray, the full-price tray, the one that cost $4.75 and came with an extra side and a cookie. He looked at her plate. He slowed. He said it loud enough for the next table to hear. The words were about the food. The words were about where the food came from. The words connected the food to the code and the code to the form and the form to the kind of person who fills out forms like that. Then his hand moved. It caught the edge of her tray. The tray slid across the table and fell. Mashed potatoes on the floor. Meatloaf on the floor. Milk carton on its side, leaking white across the linoleum in a slow line that reached her shoe. He laughed. The boy beside him laughed. 2 girls at the next table looked away, which was its own kind of laughing. Maya sat still. She looked at the food on the floor. She did not bend down. She did not pick it up. Picking it up would have meant accepting the position he had placed her in. Not picking it up meant the food stayed on the floor for the rest of the lunch period, and a janitor cleaned it at 1:15, and no one said anything to Bradley because no one had seen his hand move, only the result of it. She did not report him. She did not tell her mother. She did not cry in the cafeteria. She did not cry in the hallway after. She walked to the second-floor girls' bathroom at the end of the east corridor, the one no one used because the lock on the 3rd stall was broken, and the overhead light flickered in a way that made the room feel like it was breathing. She sat on the toilet lid. She unwrapped the bread roll she had put in her pocket before the tray fell, the one thing that had not gone to the floor, and she ate it. She ate it slowly. The way you eat when eating is the only act of control available to you. She ate lunch in that bathroom every school day for the next 2 years. 360 lunches. On the toilet lid, door locked, knees drawn up so her feet would not show under the stall. She ate whatever she could carry in her pockets. Bread, crackers, granola bars when her mother bought them, which was not often. She learned to eat without sound because sound in a bathroom carries, and carrying was something she had already learned to do quietly. She never sat in the cafeteria again. The building at 1100 Commerce Street was 30 stories of glass and steel, and every window on every floor was lit. Maya parked the scooter at the curb. She pulled the delivery bag from the rear rack and checked the containers inside. 4 pizza boxes, stacked, 2 salad containers, sealed, 3 bottles of water wedged along the side. Everything in place, everything accounted for. Sam was awake on her back. He was not crying. He was doing the thing he did when he was cold and tired, and had moved past crying into the quieter state beyond it. The state where his body went still, and his eyes went wide, and he pressed himself closer to her, as if trying to get inside her skin where it was warmer. She walked toward the entrance. The doors were glass. Through them, the lobby opened into a space that was larger than her entire apartment building. Marble floors, white and gray, polished to the kind of shine that reflects light back at you like a question. A security desk with a man sitting behind it in a uniform that was cleaner and better fitted than anything she owned. Recessed lighting in the ceiling that cast no shadows, the kind of light that costs money to produce. Light that was designed not to illuminate, but to create an atmosphere. And the atmosphere it created was, you are somewhere that matters. She pushed through the doors. The warmth hit her body the way warm air hits a body that has been cold for too long, not as comfort, but as a kind of shock. The contrast. The building was 72 degrees. She had been in 28. The difference was 44 degrees, and her body registered every one of them in a single second, and the registration was not pleasant. It was disorienting. The warmth made her aware of the cold in a way the cold itself had not. The way you do not know how wet you are until you step into a dry room. Water ran from her poncho onto the marble. It pooled at her feet. A small puddle forming on a floor that probably cost more per square foot than her rent. She looked down at it. She knew what it meant. It meant she was making a mess in someone else's space. It meant her presence was leaving a mark in a place that was designed to show no marks. Sam shifted on her back. He whimpered. She bounced her heels, the automatic rhythm, the one that worked for 3 minutes. The sound of a baby echoed in the marble lobby, the way sound echoes in spaces, built for silence and business and the particular quiet of money. The security guard looked at her. He did not stand. He did not speak. He looked at her the way people look at delivery drivers in buildings like this, without hostility, without kindness, with the efficient blankness of a man who processes 40 deliveries a night and has learned that delivery drivers are a category, not individuals. She was a poncho and a bag and a pair of wet shoes. She was a transaction passing through. She walked to the elevator. She pressed the button. The doors opened. Inside, the elevator was mirrored on 3 sides. She stepped in. She saw herself. The image was immediate and total. A woman in a clear plastic poncho that had gone cloudy from 31 uses, hair soaked, pressed flat against her forehead and the sides of her face. Skin flushed red from cold, the particular red that appears on dark skin when the blood rushes to the surface in an attempt to keep the body warm. A baby on her back, wrapped in a homemade carrier made from a bedsheet, face pressed into her neck, eyes open, while watching nothing. A delivery bag hanging from her left hand, black, square, branded with the logo of a company that paid her per delivery and offered no insurance and would replace her with another driver within 6 minutes of her quitting. She looked at herself the way you look at yourself when you see yourself through someone else's eyes for the first time in a long time. She looked like exactly what she was. And what she was, in this elevator, in this building, on this floor, was a woman who did not belong here, and whose presence was a temporary inconvenience that would end as soon as the food was delivered and the elevator doors closed behind her. The elevator stopped at 27. The doors opened. The hallway was carpeted, deep gray, thick enough that her wet shoes made no sound on it, which meant the carpet absorbed things, including her footsteps, including her. The lights were warm, The walls were lined with framed photographs of buildings the company had developed. Glass towers in different cities, each one a monument to the kind of wealth that builds things. She walked. She left wet footprints on the carpet behind her. She could see them if she turned around, dark ovals on the gray surface, a trail leading from the elevator to wherever she was going. She did not turn around. She reached the office suite at the end of the hall. The door was open. The room inside was large, a conference area with a long table and leather chairs and a wall of windows that looked out over the city. And through the windows, the rain falling through the light of the street lamps 27 floors below, and the cars moving through it, small and distant, and the city laid out like a map of itself. A man stood in the room. He was facing her. He was wearing a gray suit and a white shirt and a watch that caught the overhead light each time he moved his wrist. His shoes were polished. His hair was cut close. He had the posture of a man who believed his position in a room was earned by something other than the door he had walked through to get there. He looked at Maya. His eyes moved from her face to the delivery bag to the baby on her back, then back to her face. 3 seconds. The recognition traveled across his features, the way weather crosses a landscape, visible, measurable, changing the surface it moved over. He knew her, and on his face, the thing that Maya saw was not surprise. It was comfort. The specific comfort of a man who has just confirmed that the distance between himself and the person standing in front of him is exactly what he always believed it to be. He had been above her in the 11th grade. He was above her now. Nothing had changed. The cafeteria tray was still on the floor. He opened the first pizza box. He touched the surface of the cheese with 2 fingers. He pulled his hand back. He said the word cold the way you say a word that is not really about the thing it describes, but about the power of the person saying it. He said the food was unacceptable. He said he would not be paying for cold food. He said this with a volume that was calculated, loud enough for the 2 employees sitting at the far end of the conference table to hear, because Bradley had always needed an audience the way a fire needs oxygen. Without it, the performance could not sustain itself. He looked at her again. He tilted his head. He said her name. Maya. He paused. He said it again, slower. Maya, right. From Ridgemont. The way he said Ridgemont had weight. It carried zip codes and census data and the specific sound of a word being used as a weapon by someone who had practiced using words that way for so long it had become involuntary. He asked about the baby. Why she had brought a child. Whether she understood this was a place of business. Whether she was aware of food safety regulations. Each question was its own incision, small, precise, leaving no visible wound. The kind of cut that does not bleed immediately, but opens later, at night, when you are alone and the room is quiet and the sentence comes back to you in full. Maya did not step back. She did not lower her eyes. She did not put the bag down. She stood in the doorway of a conference room on the 27th floor of a building that bore another man's name, and she held the delivery bag in her left hand, and she felt Sam's breath on her back, and she felt the water running down her legs into her shoes, and she looked at Bradley with the specific stillness of a person who has been in this position before and has learned that stillness is the only response that does not give the other person more than they have already taken. The 2 employees at the table watched. One of them looked at the baby. The other looked at the floor. Bradley reached for the pizza box. His hand closed around the edge. He lifted it off the table. The motion was the same motion, the same angle, the same hand. 11 years apart, and the geometry had not changed. The tray in the cafeteria, the box in the conference room, the food that belonged to someone else, being taken and discarded by someone who had never been hungry enough to understand what food means when you cannot afford to replace it. His hand moved the box toward the edge of the table. Then a voice spoke from behind the glass wall. Harrison Caldwell had been standing in the conference room across the hall for 7 minutes. The room was dark. He had not turned the lights on when he came back from the restroom because the lights were not necessary for the work he was doing, which was not work at all but the particular form of waiting that a man does when he has been alone for 7 years and the office is quieter than the house, and the house is quieter than he can bear. He was 62 years old. He wore a white dress shirt with the collar unbuttoned and no tie and khaki pants, and flat brown shoes that cost $40 and that his assistant had once suggested he replace with something that reflected his position, and he had not replaced them because the shoes still worked, and he did not believe that a man's shoes needed to reflect anything other than the fact that he had walked somewhere that day. He had built Caldwell and Associates from a one-room office on Brambleton Avenue 31 years ago. He had started with a $12,000 loan from a credit union that no longer existed, and he had turned that money into a development company that now managed commercial properties in 9 states, employed 4,200 people, and was valued on paper at $2.3 billion. He did not think about the number often. Numbers that large stop being numbers and become abstractions, and Harrison did not like abstractions. He liked concrete things: walls, floors, the specific weight of a building's foundation, the way a door closes when it is properly hung. His wife had died 7 years ago. Cancer, the kind that announces itself late and moves fast and leaves the person beside it standing in a room that still smells like her and holding a coffee cup she was using and wondering whether to wash it or leave it exactly where it is. He had washed it. He had washed it the morning after the funeral because dishes in the sink were a problem, and problems were things he could solve, and solving problems was the only language his body understood when grief arrived and did not leave. He stayed late at the office not because the work required it, but because the house was large and the rooms were clean, and the silence in them was the kind of silence that has weight. The office had a different silence: productive, purposeful, the silence of a place where things happen even when no one is there. He had heard the elevator. He had seen the woman step into the hallway through the glass partition. He had seen the poncho and the delivery bag and the baby on her back. He had watched her walk toward the conference suite, leaving wet prints on the carpet. And he had noticed the prints the way he noticed everything about his buildings, not with judgment, but with the detailed attention of a man who understood that a building is not walls and floors, but the things that happen between them. He had watched Bradley take the food. He had watched Bradley open the box. He had watched Bradley's face as Bradley looked at the woman, and he had seen something in that face that he recognized, not because he had seen Bradley make that expression before, but because he had seen that expression before on other faces in other rooms, and he knew what it was. It was contempt. The particular contempt that comes not from anger but from certainty, the certainty that the person standing in front of you is less than you, that their position beneath you is natural and permanent, and does not require examination. He knew that expression because his mother had stood in front of it every day for 20 years. His mother's name was Lorraine. She cleaned offices. That was the sentence, the whole life compressed into 3 words. She cleaned offices. She cleaned them at night because that was when the offices were empty and the people who worked in them during the day did not have to see the person who made their workspaces usable. She cleaned them for $7.25 an hour because that was minimum wage in 1998, and she cleaned them without gloves because gloves cost money, and the company did not provide them. And her hands showed it. Her hands were the first thing Harrison thought of when he thought of his mother, which was every day. He remembered a specific night. He was 11. His mother had brought him to work because the babysitter canceled, and there was no other option. He sat in a plastic chair in the hallway of an office building downtown, and he did his homework under a fluorescent light that buzzed at a frequency he could feel in his teeth. His mother was on her knees in the office across the hall, scrubbing the floor with a brush and a bucket of water that she carried from room to room because the mop was broken and the company had not replaced it. A man walked through, suit, tie, briefcase. He walked across the wet floor his mother had just cleaned. He did not look down. He did not see her. He walked across the clean surface and left shoe prints in the wet. And his mother watched him walk, and she did not say anything, and she got back on her knees, and she scrubbed the prints away, and she kept working. Harrison saw this from the chair. He saw his mother's face. He saw the man's shoes. He saw the prints being erased as if they had never existed, as if the man had never walked there, as if the only evidence of his passing was the extra work he had caused and the silence of the woman doing it. He had built every building since then with that image somewhere behind his eyes. Not as motivation, not as revenge. As a compass, the question was never how much money can I make. The question was what kind of building am I making, And who is on their knees inside it? He stood now behind the glass. He watched Bradley hold the pizza box. He watched Bradley's hand move it toward the edge of the table. He watched the woman standing in the doorway, not moving, not speaking, holding a baby on her back and a bag in her hand, and the specific dignity of a person who has been told their entire life that they do not deserve to be in the room, and has walked into the room anyway. He did not step forward because it was the right thing to do. He stepped forward because the woman in the doorway was standing in the same posture his mother had been standing in 51 years ago, and he could not watch it happen again. Not in his building, not with his name on the wall. He opened the glass door. He walked into the hallway. He did not rush. He walked the way a man walks when every floor he steps on belongs to him, which is not with arrogance, but with the particular calm of ownership that does not need to announce itself. He reached the doorway of the conference suite. Bradley's hand was still on the pizza box. The box was at the edge of the table. The woman was still standing. The baby was still silent. Harrison stopped. He looked at Bradley. He looked at the pizza box. He looked at Maya. He looked at Sam. He looked at the puddle of rainwater at her feet. 5 seconds passed. In the silence, the clock on the conference room wall moved through its ticks, and Sam breathed against his mother's back, and the rain fell against the windows 27 stories above the street, and the sound of all three things filled the room, the way silence fills a room when it is about to be broken by the one person in the building who has the authority to break it. Harrison Caldwell opened his mouth. He spoke for the first time in this story. Maya did not go to college. That was not a decision. It was a math problem. Tuition at the community college on Tidewater Drive was $4,200 a year. Her mother made $23,400. Rent was $9,600. The remainder was divided among electricity and food and bus fare, and the specific accumulation of costs that attach themselves to being alive in a city that does not subsidize the living. There was no remainder after the remainder. The math did not work, so Maya did not go. She got a job 3 days after graduation. Hostess at a seafood restaurant on the waterfront, $8.25 an hour plus a share of tips that never amounted to more than $14 a night because hostesses do not get tipped the way servers do. They get what is left over, which is the story of a hostess in a sentence. She worked there 7 months. Then the restaurant closed for renovations that never happened, and she moved to a cashier position at a grocery store on Granby Street. $9 an hour, no tips, 32 hours a week, because 32 hours meant the company did not have to offer health insurance. Then a warehouse, then a call center, then another restaurant, this time as a dishwasher because dishwashers made $10.50 and did not have to smile. She moved through jobs the way water moves through a landscape that offers no basin to collect in. She flowed. She did not settle, not because she was restless, but because none of the jobs she held were designed to hold her back. Her mother died on a Wednesday in March. Cervical cancer. Stage 4, by the time it was found, because her mother had not been to a doctor in 6 years, because her mother did not have insurance and did not qualify for Medicaid, because her income was $312 above the cutoff, which is a number that should be meaningless and is not. She was 49 years old. She died in the hospital on Raleigh Avenue in a room with a window that faced the parking lot, and Maya was sitting beside her holding her hand, and her mother's hand was the same shape as her own, the same knuckles, the same lines across the palm, and she held it the way you hold something that is about to become a memory. Maya was 25. She had no siblings, no father, no aunts or uncles who lived closer than 600 miles. The apartment lease was in her mother's name. She had 30 days to vacate. She moved to the basement studio on the east side, $680 a month. She found the dishwashing job at the diner on Commerce Street, 5 a.m. to 1 p.m., $10.50 an hour. She started delivery driving at night through the app, 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. Variable pay. The two jobs together produced $1,680 a month in the months when she worked every day and nothing went wrong, which was not every month, because things go wrong at a rate that is proportional to the number of things you cannot afford to fix. Then there was a man. His name does not matter to this story. He was there for 8 months. He was kind at first, then less kind, then absent, then gone. He left when she was 6 months pregnant. He did not leave a note. He left a gap, which is different from a note because a note explains and a gap just exists. She did not look for him. She did not call. She understood that looking for someone who has chosen to disappear is a form of labor she could not afford. Sam was born on a Tuesday at 3:47 inches the morning at Norfolk General. She delivered him alone. Not alone in the room. There were nurses, a doctor, the specific machinery of a hospital birth. Alone in the way that matters. No one in the waiting room. No one to call. No one to hand the baby to when the baby was placed on her chest and she looked at his face for the first time and understood that everything she had been carrying was now doubled, and the doubling was not a burden, it was a direction. She had been moving through the world without a fixed point. Now there was a fixed point. He weighed 7 pounds 4 ounces. He had her hands. She took him home to the basement apartment 2 days later. She carried him down the 7 concrete steps. She laid him on the mattress on the floor. She sat beside him, and she did the math. $1,680 a month. $680 rent. $340 health insurance through the marketplace. The bronze plan, the cheapest one available, which covered almost nothing but which she paid for because Sam needed a pediatrician and pediatricians do not see children without insurance. $180 diapers and formula because her body did not produce enough milk, not because of any medical reason she could identify, but because stress affects milk supply the way it affects everything else, quietly and without permission. $120 gas and maintenance on the scooter. That was $1,320 in fixed costs. $1,680 minus $1,320 left $360 a month for everything else: food, soap, laundry, the occasional thing that breaks and cannot be ignored. $360 divided by 30 days was $12 a day. $12 a day for a woman and a child to exist. She did not describe this as difficult. She did not describe it at all. She managed it. She managed it the way she managed everything, with a system. Diapers bought in bulk when the dollar store ran a sale. Formula measured precisely, not a scoop more than the instructions called for. Not because she was careful by nature, but because each scoop cost 11 cents and 11 cents was a thing she counted. Food from the diner, the plates that came back to the kitchen unfinished. The cook let her take them. He did not ask why. He wrapped them in foil and set them on the counter by the back door, and she picked them up on her way out, and she did not call it charity because it was not offered as charity. It was offered as food. And food was what it was. Her hands. After 8 hours of dishwashing, the skin on her hands cracked at the knuckles, and between the fingers where the hot water and the commercial-grade soap stripped away everything the skin produced to protect itself. She came home at 1:30 inches the afternoon. She fed Sam. She put him down for his nap. She sat on the mattress and rubbed Vaseline into her hands and waited 30 minutes for it to absorb before she could touch anything without leaving a greasy residue. Then she put on the thin cotton gloves she used for deliveries, the ones that cost $2 at the hardware store, and lasted about 2 weeks before the fingertips wore through. Her hands had not stopped hurting since the day Sam was born. Not the pain of injury, the pain of use. The constant, low-grade ache of skin that is asked to do more than skin is designed to do and does it anyway because the hands do not get to decide. The hands do what the math requires. She heard the footsteps on the carpet. She did not turn around. She did not need to. She knew from the weight of them and the pace of them that they belonged to a man who was not in a hurry, and the absence of hurry told her everything the footsteps did not say. Harrison spoke. He did not raise his voice. He did not address Bradley. He looked at Maya. He looked at Sam on her back, the small face pressed against her neck, the cloudy plastic poncho, the water still running from her shoes onto the carpet. He looked at her hands, red and cracked, and gripping the delivery bag. He said, "Would you like to sit down?" It was not a question. It was a door. He walked to the conference table and pulled out a chair. A leather chair. The kind of chair that rolls on 5 casters and has armrests and weighs more than Sam. He pulled it out and he turned it toward her and he stood beside it and he waited. No one had pulled a chair out for Maya in 27 years of living. She had pulled out chairs for other people. She had pushed chairs back under tables after other people left. She had wiped chairs clean at the diner and stacked chairs at the end of shifts and carried chairs upstairs in apartments that did not have elevators. She had never been on the receiving end of the gesture. She did not sit down. Not yet. She stood in the doorway and looked at the chair, and she looked at the man standing beside it, and she assessed. Because assessing was what you did before you moved into unfamiliar space. Harrison turned to Bradley. The turn was slow, deliberate. The kind of turn that a man makes when he wants the person he is turning toward to feel the full weight of the rotation. Bradley had already changed. His hand had come off the pizza box. His shoulders had pulled back. His chin had dropped half an inch. His voice, when he started to speak, was a different instrument entirely. Softer, faster, pitched upward in the specific frequency of a man who has realized that the person he was performing for was not the most important person in the room. Harrison did not acknowledge the change. He asked a question. "How long have you been managing evening orders?" Bradley said 14 months. Harrison asked another question. "Is this how you speak to the people who deliver food to this building?" Bradley began to explain. The pizza was cold. There were policies. The app had a rating system, quality standards. Harrison let him finish. He let every word land on the floor of the conference room, the way Bradley had let Maya's lunch tray land on the floor of the cafeteria 11 years ago. He let the words sit there. Then he said, "I did not ask about the pizza. I asked about the woman and the child standing in a puddle of rainwater in my building." Bradley's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The two employees at the end of the table were no longer looking at the floor. They were looking at Harrison. The room had rearranged itself. The gravity had shifted. The person with the loudest voice 60 seconds ago was now the smallest object in the room. Harrison picked up his phone. He dialed a number. He said, "Karen, this is Harrison. I need security on 27. Please have them escort Mr. Bradley to collect his personal items from his office. His building access card should be deactivated at midnight." He hung up. He did not look at Bradley when he said it. He looked at the window. He looked at the rain. Bradley stood in the conference room. He did not move for 4 seconds. Then he moved. He walked to the door. He walked past Maya. He walked past Sam. He did not look at either of them. He walked down the carpeted hallway in his gray suit and his polished shoes and his expensive watch, and the hallway was long and quiet, and his footsteps made no sound on the thick carpet, and the silence of his leaving was total. Maya stood in the doorway. She did not say thank you. She did not say anything. Her hands were still holding the delivery bag. Sam's breath was still warm between her shoulder blades. The water had stopped dripping from her poncho. It had soaked through to her skin a long time ago. There was nothing left to drip. She looked at Harrison. The expression on her face was not gratitude. The narrator cannot name it because naming it would reduce it. It was something that lived in the space between disbelief and recognition. The face of a person who has just watched a thing happen that she had stopped believing could happen. Harrison looked at the chair. He looked at Maya. He said, "Please." She sat down. She sat in the leather chair in the conference room on the 27th floor of a building that bore the name of the man standing beside her, and the chair held her weight, and Sam's weight, and the weight of the delivery bag, and the weight of everything else she had been carrying, and it did not move. It stayed where it was. That was what chairs were supposed to do. Hold you in place when you could not hold yourself. Harrison walked to a closet near the window. He opened it. He took out a blanket, dark gray, folded. He brought it to Maya. She took it. She wrapped it around Sam, pulling him from the carrier on her back and settling him in her lap. The blanket was cashmere. She did not know this. She knew it was warm. She knew it was soft in a way that nothing Sam had ever been wrapped in was soft. She watched her son's face change as the warmth reached his skin, the small muscles around his eyes relaxing, the fist at his mouth uncurling. He was asleep in 2 minutes. He slept the way children sleep when warmth arrives after cold, completely, as if the body has been waiting for permission to stop fighting, and the permission has finally come. Harrison sat down across from her. He did not sit at the head of the table. He sat in the chair closest to hers, on the same side, the way you sit with someone when the conversation is not a meeting but a reckoning, he said. My mother cleaned offices for 20 years. Maya looked at him. She did not speak. She waited, he said. She cleaned them at night because the people who used them during the day did not want to see the person who made their desks ready for them every morning. She came home at midnight, smelling like bleach and floor wax. She made my lunch for school before she went to bed. She was up again at 6. She did this for 20 years. She did not complain. Not because she was not tired, because complaining required energy she needed to save for the next shift. He paused. He looked at the window. The rain was still falling. The city was still lit below them. 27 stories of distance between the room they sat in and the streets where Maya had been riding an hour ago. He said, When I was 11, I watched a man in a suit walk across a floor my mother had just scrubbed on her hands and knees. He did not look down. He did not see her. She got back on her knees and cleaned his shoe prints, and she did not say a word. I sat in a chair in the hallway, and I watched this happen, and I have never stopped watching it happen. Every building I have built since then was built so that no woman would have to be on her knees in it. He stopped talking. He let the silence sit. The clock on the wall ticked. Sam breathed against Maya's chest, the small rhythmic sound of a child asleep in cashmere for the first time in his life. Maya said, I work 2 jobs. I wash dishes from 5 inches the morning until 1 inch the afternoon. I deliver food from 6 at night until 11. I have $360 a month for everything that is not rent or insurance or diapers. I bring my son with me because I cannot afford childcare and I do not have anyone to leave him with. I am not asking for anything. I came here to deliver pizza. She said it the way you say things that are facts, without pitch, without performance. The way you state the dimensions of a room you have been living in long enough to know every measurement by heart. Harrison was quiet for 12 seconds. She counted them. She had learned to count silence the way she counted money, precisely because both had a cost. Then he said something she did not expect, and the not expecting was not because the words were dramatic, but because the words were ordinary, and ordinary things had stopped happening to her a long time ago. Bradley walked through the lobby of the building for the last time at 10:17 that night. A security guard walked beside him, not behind him. Beside him, the way security walks with people when the instruction is escort, not remove. There is a difference. The difference is the distance between the guard's shoulder and yours, and the direction the guard's eyes are pointed, and whether the guard holds the door for you on the way out or simply opens it. Bradley carried a cardboard box. The box was the same kind that all fired employees carry, the kind that office supply closets keep stacked flat in the corner for exactly this purpose, the kind that holds a framed photograph and a coffee mug and a desk plant, and the specific small accumulations of a person's professional identity. His box held a photograph of his parents taken at their beach house 4 years ago, before the dealerships were sold, before the house was sold, before the version of Bradley that existed in the photograph became a person who no longer matched the frame. He walked across the marble lobby. The same marble that Maya had walked across 90 minutes earlier, wet and dripping, leaving a trail. His shoes were dry. His suit was pressed. But the distance between his footsteps and hers, which had looked so vast from the 27th floor, was narrower than the marble made it appear. His father had filed for bankruptcy 3 years ago. The 3 dealerships that had once occupied lots on Route 17 and Newtown Road and the Boulevard were closed, the signs taken down, the lots leased to other businesses. The colonial house with the pool had been sold to cover debts. The boat was gone. The BMW was gone. Bradley drove a leased Nissan now. He wore the watch because the watch was the last thing that looked like before, and he wore it every day the way a man wears armor that no longer fits, but that he cannot take off because without it he does not know what shape he is. His salary at Caldwell and Associates was $62,000 a year. His rent was $1,400 a month. His car payment was $380. His credit card debt was $14,200 at 22.9% interest. The math was not sustainable. He knew this. He knew it the way you know things that you have chosen not to look at directly, the way you know there is a crack in the foundation, but you keep walking across the floor, because acknowledging the crack means acknowledging that the floor might not hold. He had not bullied Maya because he hated her. He had bullied her because seeing her standing in the doorway with a baby on her back and a delivery bag in her hand, and the specific posture of a person who has nothing left to lose, reminded him of something he could not afford to be reminded of. The distance between them. It had been enormous in the 11th grade. It was not enormous now. It was 4 months of missed credit card payments and one more job loss, and standing in the lobby carrying a cardboard box, the distance had collapsed entirely. He did not know this about himself. Self-knowledge is not a skill that is taught to people who grow up believing the floor will always hold. He knew only that seeing her had produced a feeling he did not have a name for, and the feeling needed somewhere to go, and cruelty was the only door he knew how to open. He was not a villain. He was a man who had learned contempt the way some people learn a language, early, by immersion, in a household where the value of a person was measured by the car in the driveway and the zip code on the mail, and he had never been taught another system of measurement. He had never been required to learn one. Until tonight. He walked through the glass doors into the rain. The security guard held the door. Bradley stepped out. The rain hit his face. His suit began to darken at the shoulders. He stood on the sidewalk with the cardboard box in his arms, and the rain coming down and the building rising behind him, 30 stories of glass and light, and he did not look up at it. He looked at the street. He looked at the place where Maya's scooter had been parked, the place where a woman with a baby had arrived and carried food up 27 floors and been told she was not enough, and the place was empty now, and the emptiness of it was the first honest thing he had seen all night. He did not cry. He did not call anyone. He walked to his car. He put the box in the back seat. He sat behind the wheel. He did not start the engine. He sat in the dark in the rain in the parking lot, and he was still. Harrison said, "I am not offering you charity." Maya looked at him. Sam was still asleep in her lap, the cashmere blanket pulled to his chin, his breathing steady and deep and trusting in the way that only a sleeping child's breathing can be trusting. Harrison said, "I am offering you a job." He said it the way he said everything, without decoration, without warmth and without coldness, with the flat precision of a man who has been making offers for 31 years and has learned that the offer itself is the only thing that matters, not the tone, not the presentation, the substance. He said, "Entry level, mailroom, $17.50 an hour." He paused. He let the number exist in the room by itself, $17.50. It was not a large number. It was $7 more than she made washing dishes. It was the difference between $360 a month for everything else and something closer to $900. It was the difference between counting scoops of formula and not counting them, between Vaseline on cracked hands and gloves provided by an employer, between $12 a day and $30 a day. The number was not large. The distance it covered was, he said, health insurance after 90 days, full coverage, not bronze, gold. He said, "There is a daycare on the 3rd floor of this building. It is for employees. It is free." Each sentence was its own room. He opened them one at a time. $17.50 an hour. Health insurance. Free daycare. Maya sat in the leather chair and she heard each sentence enter the air, and she did not react to any of them the way a person reacts to good news, because good news was a category she had stopped trusting. Good news, in her experience, was a door that opened and then closed before you could walk through it. Her hands tightened on the armrests of the chair. Her jaw set. She looked at Harrison with eyes that were not grateful, and were not suspicious, and were something in between. The eyes of a person who is measuring the distance between what is being said and what is real, because in her life, those two things have rarely occupied the same space. She said one word. "Why?" Harrison looked at her. Then he looked away. He looked out the window at the city below. The rain falling through the streetlights, the cars moving through it, the buildings dark and lit in patterns that made no sense from above, but that made all the sense in the world from the street. He said, "Because my mother never got this offer, and I have spent 30 years making sure the next woman like her does." The room was quiet. The clock moved. Sam shifted in Maya's lap, his hand finding the edge of the cashmere blanket and closing around it the way he closed around her index finger at night, automatically, without waking, holding on to the nearest soft thing, because holding on was the only instinct he had perfected in 14 months of being alive. Maya looked at her son. She looked at her hands on the armrests. The cracks along her knuckles, the redness, the skin that had not stopped hurting since the day he was born. These hands would still work. They would work on Monday. They would sort mail and carry packages and push a cart through hallways. They would still ache at the end of the day. But the ache would belong to a job that had insurance. The ache would happen in a building where her son was 24 floors below her, playing with toys, being watched by someone whose job it was to watch him. The ache would be the same. Everything around it would be different. She said, "I will be there Monday." She said it the way she said everything. Without excess, without performance. The way you confirm a fact that has just become true. Harrison nodded. He did not smile. Smiling would have made the moment smaller than it was. He stood. He walked to the door. He stopped. He turned. He said, "The mailroom starts at 8, but the daycare opens at 7:30. That was all. He left the room. His footsteps moved down the hallway, soft on the thick carpet, steady, unhurried, the footsteps of a man who had done the thing he came into the hallway to do, and was returning to the quiet office where the silence was waiting for him, the productive silence, the silence he preferred to the silence of his house, which was the same silence but carried a different weight. Maya sat in the chair. She did not move for a long time. She held Sam. She looked out the window. The rain had not stopped. The city was still there. The streets she had ridden through an hour ago were still wet, still cold, still 27 floors below her. The distance between where she was sitting and where she had been standing was the height of a building and the width of a chair. Both measurements mattered. Both were real. 6 months passed. They passed the way months pass when each day has a structure and the structure has a purpose and the purpose has a name. The name was Sam. Maya arrived at the building at 1100 Commerce Street every morning at 7:15. She walked through the glass doors. She crossed the marble lobby. Her shoes were dry. She did not leave a trail. She carried Sam on her hip because he was too big for the carrier now, 26 pounds at his last checkup, and he had started walking 3 months ago, and walking had changed him the way walking changes all children, turning them from passengers into participants, from carried to carrying, from weight to will. She took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The daycare was a room with large windows and small chairs and bins of toys organized by type, blocks in one bin, animals in another, soft things in a third. The walls were painted a shade of yellow that was designed to suggest sunshine without producing it. The floor was padded. The staff wore name tags and smiles that were not forced but were also not accidental. They were the smiles of people who had been trained to smile, which is different from people who smile because they cannot help it, but which serves the same function in the eyes of a 20-month-old child who needs to believe that the place his mother is leaving him is a place where smiling happens. The first day, Sam did not let go of her hand. She sat with him on the floor for 40 minutes. She built a tower of blocks. She knocked it down. She built it again. She knocked it down again. Sam watched. He did not touch the blocks. He watched his mother's hands move them, and he watched her face, and he was reading her the way children read adults, not for words but for safety, measuring whether this room and these people and this distance from her was something that could be survived. At minute 41, he picked up a block. He held it. He looked at her. She nodded. He placed it on top of another block. She stood up. She walked toward the door. He watched her go. He did not cry. He held the block. Day 2, 20 minutes. Day 3, she walked him in. He let go of her hand at the door. He waved. He said the word, "Ma." 1 syllable, the same one. But the way he said it at the door of the daycare was different from the way he had said it at night in the basement apartment. At night, it meant come closer. At the daycare door, it meant you can go. I will be here when you come back. The same syllable, different direction. She took the elevator to the 2nd floor. The mailroom was a room the size of her old apartment, filled with sorting bins and a cart and a scale and the specific organized chaos of a system that processes 340 pieces of mail per day across 12 floors. She sorted, she stacked, she loaded the cart, she pushed it through the hallways. Each delivery loop took 22 minutes. She completed 6 loops a day. She learned the names on the envelopes before she learned the faces that belonged to them. She learned which offices liked their mail early and which did not care. She learned the building, the way she had learned the delivery routes, by repetition, by rhythm, by showing up. She did not see Harrison, not in the way that employees see the CEO of a company that occupies 30 floors. He was a name on the building. He was a presence that existed in the abstract. He did not visit the mailroom. He did not check on her. He did not send notes or arrange meetings or do any of the things that would have turned his offer into something other than what it was, which was a job she had been hired to do, a job she did. She was not a project. She was not a story he told at board meetings. She was an employee. And being an employee, being treated as an employee, being expected to show up and do the work and meet the standard the same as every other person in the building, was the first form of respect she had received from an institution in her adult life. In the evenings, after Sam was asleep, she opened the laptop the company lent to employees enrolled in the internal training program. It was a refurbished ThinkPad with a cracked corner on the screen and a battery that lasted 3 hours. She opened the course catalog. She enrolled in basic accounting. Not because anyone told her to, because she had decided that the mailroom was a starting point, not a destination, and the distance between the two was measured in skills she did not yet have but intended to acquire. She studied at the kitchen table of her new apartment. It was still small. 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, $780 a month. But it had a window that looked out onto a street lined with oak trees, and the light that came through it in the morning was actual light, not the memory of light, not the gray suggestion of a sky seen through 14 inches of gap between 2 buildings. It was light. It came in, and it stayed. One morning, 6 months and 4 days after the night she had delivered pizza to the 27th floor, Maya pushed the mail cart out of the elevator on the 27th floor. She walked down the hallway. The carpet was the same. The photographs on the walls were the same. The warm light, the thick air, the quiet that costs money to produce. All of it the same. She reached the spot. She knew it by instinct. The place where she had stood in a poncho dripping rainwater, holding a delivery bag, with Sam on her back and Bradley's voice in her ears, and the weight of 11 years of distance pressing down on her from above. The carpet was clean. The spot was dry. There was no puddle. There was no stain. There was no evidence that she had ever stood there wet and shaking and being told by a man in a gray suit that her food was cold and her presence was wrong. She stopped. She stood on the dry carpet in her employee badge and her work shoes and her pressed shirt. She stood there for 3 seconds. She did not think about Bradley. She did not think about the pizza. She thought about the chair, the leather chair that Harrison had pulled out for her. She thought about the fact that she was standing in the same hallway where she had been offered a seat, and now she walked through it every day delivering mail, and no one pulled a chair out for her anymore, because she did not need anyone to. She had her own chair now, in the mailroom, a rolling chair with a torn cushion. It was hers. She walked on. She delivered the mail, 22 minutes per loop. 6 loops a day, 340 pieces. The numbers did not change. She did. That evening, Maya stood at the window of her apartment. Sam was asleep in his crib. A real crib, not a mattress on the floor. A crib with rails and a mobile that played a song she did not recognize but that Sam liked, the kind of mechanical lullaby that loops every 45 seconds and that she had learned to sleep through the way parents learn to sleep through everything except the specific sound of their child's breathing changing. The rain was falling. The same rain, the same city, the same streets she had ridden through 6 months ago with Sam on her back and her fingers numb on the handlebars and the math running in her head like a machine she could not turn off. The rain fell the same way. It hit the window the same way. It sounded the same. She was inside. She looked at her hands. The cracks were still there. Her knuckles were still rough. The skin still split in the cold. But the cracks were from sorting mail and carrying packages, not from 8 hours of commercial dish soap without gloves. The hands were the same hands. The work they did had changed. The story they told had changed. The hands had not. On the table behind her, a single sheet of paper, her 6-month performance review. 1 line, printed in the company's standard font, meets expectations, not exceeds, not outstanding, meets. The word sat on the paper the way a word sits when it means exactly what it says and nothing more. She had met the expectations that the company had for an employee in her position. She had done the job. She had done it at the level it was supposed to be done. She was not exceptional. She was adequate. And adequate, for a woman who had been told in every way a system can tell a person that she was not enough, was the heaviest word on the page. She did not frame it. She did not hang it on the wall. She left it on the table where she studied at night, beside the laptop with the cracked screen, and she looked at it sometimes the way you look at things that matter more than they appear to. The rain poncho hung on a hook behind the front door, the clear plastic one, the $3 one, the one with the missing snap and the cloudy surface from 31 uses. She had kept it, not because she wanted to remember the cold, because the poncho was the distance. It was the measurement between where she had been and where she was. 6 months and 1 chair. That was the distance. And the poncho hung there, so she would not forget how far she had come, which was not far by some measurements, and was everything by the only one that mattered. This story is fictional, but the world it describes is not. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are approximately 7.2 million single mothers in the workforce in the United States. Nearly 30% of them live below the poverty line. The average cost of childcare in America is $1,230 per month, which exceeds the average monthly rent in 22 states. The gig economy employs an estimated 4.4 million workers who receive no health insurance, no paid leave, and no protections beyond the algorithm that assigns their next delivery. Workplace bullying affects an estimated 30% of American workers, according to the Workplace Bullying Institute. The majority of targets are women. The majority of perpetrators are men in management positions. The behavior is legal in 49 states. If you or someone you know is a single parent in need of support, the National Single Parent Resource Center provides assistance with housing, childcare, and employment. The United Way's 211 helpline connects families to local services including food assistance, utility aid, and emergency shelter. What stayed with me while creating this story was not the billionaire, it was the chair. The simple act of pulling a chair out for someone who has been standing for too long. Not because you are required to, not because it looks good, because you see a person who is carrying more than they should have to carry alone, and you make a space for them to sit down. Not every story has a billionaire, but every story has a chair. Someone, somewhere, pulled a chair out for you when no one else would. Or maybe you were the one who pulled it. Tell us in the comments, who pulled the chair for you? Or, whose chair are you still sitting in? Name them if you can. They deserve to be named. See you in the next one.